Thank you for your participation in the Renew My Church process. Your role is essential and helps offer feedback to Cardinal Cupich for the structural changes that are necessary for the Archdiocese. Through the course of the local level discernment and planning component of Renew My Church, you are gathering as leaders to consider questions such as, what has changed in our larger community that is demanding from us a new resolve or a different focus? What current realities in our Catholic community, nationally, in the Archdiocese, within our grouping and parishes, have the biggest implications for our future? We now take the next step in this journey and explore potential scenarios for the structural configuration of your grouping for the future. A scenario is a possibility offered for discernment regarding new parish and school structures in the grouping. The various grouping scenarios that you will see momentarily include the number and placement of parishes, worship sites, schools, and the number of pastors assigned. The scenarios were developed by the Archdiocese in alignment with the foundational principles for structural viability and in response to the current realities of the grouping. It is important to emphasize that these potential scenarios are meant to serve as conversation starters and are not conclusive. It is Cardinal Cupich's intent that from these initial scenarios, you can suggest alternative scenarios that best respond to the needs of your community while addressing the needs, opportunities, demands, and resources surfaced through Renew My Church and included in the foundational principles, specifically in the areas of pastoral life, priests, facilities, and financial stability. The question at hand is, how should our parishes and schools be organized to carry out our mission most effectively with the gifts and resources within the grouping? The process of renewing our church in each grouping will not end with these questions of structure and organization. These are the beginning steps and a necessary foundation for the pastoral planning for evangelization and formation that all groupings will embark upon. The initial scenarios for structural change you're about to receive are intended to look holistically at our parishes and schools. To help process the scenarios, parish structural scenarios will follow the school structural scenarios. Currently, the Lakes region grouping consists of 4 parishes and 2 schools. School scenarios. When considering school scenarios, important factors to consider are if there is a sufficient child population in the local area to reach a vital enrollment level, generally 1 full classroom per grade in K through 8. That the school structure is financially sustainable, taking into account the availability of financial support through outside scholarships and other funding sources. School considerations for Lakes region grouping. Based on current enrollment and finances, as well as the number of school-age children in the local area, this initial scenario proposes that the schools of both St. Bede and Prince of Peace remain operating in their current structure. Each school will need to maintain its enrollment and financial sustainability into the future. The Archdiocese will be unable to fund any school operating deficits for these schools. Though a structural change is not proposed, the school leadership and communities will be encouraged to identify opportunities for collaboration across the schools. Parish scenarios. Important considerations for parish scenarios are the number of pastors available to lead parishes across the Archdiocese, the financial resources required to support a full parish staff, and how effectively each scenario could support vitality through investment in ministry over maintaining the current structure. Based on Mass attendance, St. Bede, St. Peter, and St. Raphael are all near the minimum threshold for when the Archdiocese will generally be able to assign a full-time resident pastor in the future. Based on financial resources within the grouping, 3 of the 4 parishes currently exceed the minimum level of operating revenue to sustain a full staff. St. Raphael currently does not meet this level of operating revenue. A question is which structures would be most conducive to vitality, not just having enough resources to maintain, but having enough resources to invest. Recent facilities assessments indicate that required capital needs of the churches will be affordable. Each initial scenario review proposes that all 4 churches remain open for regular Mass. Scenario A, 2 parishes. In this scenario, St. Bede, St. Peter, and St. Raphael would form a combined canonical parish. All 3 churches would remain open for regular worship under the combined parish. Prince of Peace would retain a full-time resident pastor and remain a canonically independent parish. Moving from one canonical parish among St. Bede, St. Peter, and St. Raphael could enable focused investments in ministry through shared resourcing and leadership. The pastor of this parish would have responsibility for 1 school. Based on its number of parishioners, sufficient operating revenue, and responsibility for a school, Prince of Peace could retain a full-time resident pastor as an independent parish. Scenario B, 2 parishes. In this scenario, St. Bede and St. Peter would form a combined canonical parish. Both churches would remain open for regular worship under the combined parish. Prince of Peace and St. Raphael would form a combined canonical parish. Both churches would remain open for regular worship under the combined parish. Moving to 2 parishes could enable focused investments in ministry through shared resourcing and leadership. Under this scenario, each pastor would have responsibility for 1 school. Scenario C, 3 parishes. In this scenario, St. Peter and St. Raphael would form a combined canonical parish. Both churches would remain open for regular worship under the combined parish. St. Bede would retain a full-time resident pastor and remain a canonically independent parish. Prince of Peace would retain a full-time resident pastor and remain a canonically independent parish. Combining St. Peter and St. Raphael could enable more focused investment in the Antioch area of the grouping. This combined parish would not have a school, which could help with the local pastor's load of responsibilities. While St. Bede is near the minimum threshold for when the archdiocese will generally be able to assign a full-time resident pastor in the future, the parish currently has enough people and operating revenue. The responsibility for a school would also be a reason for St. Bede to remain with a full-time resident pastor. Based on its size and presence of a school, Prince of Peace would retain a full-time resident pastor. As you receive and discuss these scenarios, remember that the process of renewing our church in each grouping will not end with these questions of structure and organization. These are the beginning steps and a necessary foundation for the pastoral planning for evangelization and formation that all groupings will embark upon. Your facilitator will now lead the rest of your gathering and invite you to reflect this evening and process this information.